The fourth time that week, I heard her horn before I saw the dust. I was standing at my front gate at 6:40 in the morning. Coffee in one hand, the chain in the other, when the white SUV came barreling up my private drive and stopped 4 feet from my chest. The window came down. Linda Carr looked at me the way you look at a dog that wandered into your kitchen. "Move your truck," she said, "and leave this gate open. You do not get to block the HOA's access road." I didn't move. She pointed a manicured finger past me at my own land. "This is community access. Has been for years. Keep locking it and we'll have it towed and fine you until you can't afford this dirt." Then she lifted her phone and started filming me in my own driveway, on the road my family had owned for 2 decades, like I was the trespasser. I remember thinking very calmly that she had no idea what she was driving over. She didn't see the trail camera bolted to the gatepost 6 inches above her head. She didn't know it had been running for 11 days. She didn't know that every single time her tires crossed my line, she was stepping on something she'd never see coming. She thought she was driving through my land. She was really driving through everything I'd already set up to bury her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That morning, all she saw was a tired-looking man in a barn jacket holding a chain, and she decided out loud, on camera, for the record, that I was the problem. "I'm not going to ask again," she said. "The board has discussed this. That gate stays open or it comes off. Your choice." Behind her, SUV. My 2 horses had pulled back into the far corner of the paddock, ears flat, spooked by the horn. She'd done that. She'd come onto my property, frightened my animals, and now she was lecturing me about access, like she'd built the road herself. I set my coffee down on the fence post. "Linda, this road is mine. The whole thing. It's on my deed." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Everything in this neighborhood is the HOA's, she said. "You should have read what you signed." That was the line I held on to. Not because it hurt, because it was wrong. And she'd said it so confidently with that little tilt of the head that I knew she believed it, all the way down. People like Linda don't lie. That's the trick of them. They're certain. And certainty, when it's built on nothing, is the easiest thing in the world to take apart. I just didn't tell her that yet. She slapped an orange HOA violation notice against my fence rail peel-in stick, the kind she went through by the box, and let it hang there crooked in the morning wind. Notice of violation. Obstruction of community access. A daily fine amount printed at the bottom in red. "That's $75 a day," she said, "starting today. It doubles if you don't comply." I looked at the orange paper. I looked at the camera over her head. I looked at her face lit up with the particular joy of someone who has never once been told no. And I said, "Okay." Just that. "Okay." It threw her. She'd come up that hill ready for a fight, braced for yelling, for a man waving his arms for something she could film and play at the next meeting as proof that I was unstable. Instead, she got a quiet, "okay," and it sat wrong with her. She squinted at me like she was trying to find the trap. There was a trap. It just wasn't the kind she was looking for. "I'll see you at the meeting," she said finally, like a threat, and threw the SUV into reverse. She backed down my drive too fast, clipped my mailbox post, didn't stop, and was gone in a cloud of dust before I'd picked my coffee back up. I stood there a minute in the quiet she left behind. Then I walked over to the gate post, reached up and checked the little blinking light on the camera. Still green, still recording. 11 days of Linda Carr's white SUV crossing my line over and over. Each pass stamped with a date and a time and a set of GPS coordinates that all said the same thing. Private property. I peeled the orange notice off my fence, folded it once and slid it into my jacket pocket. Not to throw away, to keep. Because here's what Linda didn't understand. Standing in my driveway, giving orders like she owned the ground under her own tires. If she had ever once pulled the deed for this road, she'd have known there was no HOA out here. Only me. And the mines I'd planted weren't the kind you'd ever see coming. They were the kind you set off yourself, one tire at a time, smiling at the camera the whole way down. She'd be back. They always come back. And I'd be ready with 11 days of footage and a folder I hadn't even started yet. To understand how a woman in a white SUV came to believe she owned my road, you have to understand what was here before she was. My family bought this land before the subdivision existed. Before the cul-de-sacs, before the beige houses with their matching mailboxes, before anyone had ever printed the words Whispering Pines Homeowners Association on a single sheet of paper. There was just the ranch, the road my grandfather graded by hand, and the gate. The road mattered. It was the only good way in from the county route, and my grandfather built it on our land, paid for the gravel out of his own pocket, and maintained it for 40 years. When the developer came through in the 90s and carved up the empty acreage next to us into 96 lots, they built their own entrance off the main road. They did not touch ours. They couldn't. It wasn't theirs. But people are lazy and roads don't care who's lazy. It started small. A resident here and there cutting across the corner of my drive because it shaved 2 minutes off the trip to the back lots. Then the landscaping trucks figured out the same shortcut. Then the school bus. For years, I let it slide because that's the kind of neighbor my father raised me to be. You don't make a federal case out of a few tire tracks. That was my first mistake. Not a legal one, a human one. I let a courtesy turn into a habit, and I learned slowly that an HOA cannot tell the difference between the two. Linda Carr moved into the subdivision about 3 years ago and was president within 18 months. I'm told the previous president stepped down for health reasons, which, knowing Linda, I took to mean she'd made his life unlivable until he quit. She ran the board the way some people run a small country they've just conquered, with newsletters. Got the newsletters. Monthly, then weekly. Fines for brown lawns. Fines for the wrong shade of front door. A formal citation issued to an 81-year-old widow because her wind chimes were an unapproved auditory fixture. People in that neighborhood lived with a low, constant hum of fear. The fear of the orange notice. The fear of the fine. The fear that this would be the month Linda decided to make an example of you. And somewhere in her conquest of the subdivision, Linda looked at my road, the one everybody used, the one nobody had ever stopped her from using, and she did the thing entitled people always do. She mistook getting away with it for being entitled to it. In a newsletter dated that spring, she wrote it down. I have the copy. She called my private drive the community's historic access road and announced that the board would be formalizing maintenance standards for it. No deed, no survey, no easement. Just a sentence in a newsletter printed in the same cheerful font she used for the pool schedule, quietly annexing 2 decades of my family's property with a paragraph. That's the part people miss about fake authority. It almost never starts with a lie. It starts with an assumption nobody bothers to check, repeated until it sounds like a fact. Linda didn't wake up one day and decide to steal my road. She simply never once considered that it wasn't already hers. To her, it's always been used that way, and we own it, were the same sentence. The first notices came in the mail. Polite at first, a request to coordinate access. Then less polite, a violation for keeping my own gate locked at night. As if the lock on my own gate were a problem the HOA had standing to solve. I read each one at my kitchen table, and I didn't throw a single one away. I want to be honest about what was happening inside me because from the outside I looked calm, and I mostly was. But calm isn't the same as passive. Every time one of those envelopes landed in my box, something in me went very quiet and very organized. I wasn't getting angry. I was getting a folder. I bought a real one, manila, the kind that snaps shut, and I labeled it, and into it went every notice, every newsletter, every email. I didn't know yet exactly how I'd use it. I just knew, the way you know weather is coming, that Linda Carr was not going to stop on her own. People who mistake a habit for a right never do. They escalate because the thing they're actually addicted to isn't the road or the lawn or the wind chimes. It's the obedience. And I had just told her, okay, in a tone she couldn't read, which to a person like Linda is not an answer. It's a door left open. The okay bought me about 9 days. Then the real paper came. It arrived certified, which is how the HOA dressed up its threats to feel official. I signed for it on my own porch, opened it standing up, and read it twice. It wasn't a notice anymore. It was a notice of continuing violation and intent to lien. The 75 a day had been quietly running the whole time. It now said I owed the association just over $900 for the crime of locking my own gate, and that the amount would keep climbing until I removed the obstruction from the community easement. That word again, easement. She'd started putting it in writing. Good, I thought. Keep writing. The letter said that if the balance went unpaid, the board would record a lien against the property and pursue all available remedies up to and including foreclosure. It said the association reserved the right to remove the gate at the owner's expense and tow any vehicle blocking access. At the bottom, in case I'd missed the tone, Linda had signed it herself, full title under her name, like a queen signing a death warrant, a lien, on land that had been in my family longer than her subdivision had existed. I sat down at the kitchen table with the manila folder, slid the letter inside, and felt that quiet, organized thing in my chest tick over one more notch. She didn't even wait for me to respond. She came to find me. It was a Saturday, and I'd driven down to the community mailboxes, the cluster boxes everyone shares at the mouth of the subdivision, because that's where my box was too. Linda was already there, holding court with 2 board members and a little crowd of neighbours collecting their mail. The second she saw my truck, her whole posture changed. She'd been handed an audience, and she was not going to waste it. "There he is," she announced loud enough for the whole lot. "The man who thinks he's above the rules." I got out of my truck and said nothing. I just walked to my box. "That road is the HOA's," she said, following me, her voice pitched for the crowd. "It's been community access for years. You're holding this entire neighbourhood hostage over a gate, and now you're racking up fines you can't pay? Don't come crying to the board when you lose that property." A few of the neighbours looked at their shoes. One older man started to say something and then thought better of it. The fear, the same low hum I'd watched her install in all of them. Nobody was going to stand next to me in that parking lot. I understood. She'd taught them what standing next to the wrong person cost. So I didn't ask the crowd for anything. I just took out my phone, held it up so it caught both of us, and asked Linda one question. Calm. Plain. The kind of question you ask when you already know the answer. "Linda," I said, "can you show me the recorded easement?" She blinked. "What?" "The easement," I said. "The legal one, the recorded one with the county. If the HOA has a right to that road, there's a document, a deed of easement, a plat, something filed on record. Can you show it to me?" For just a second, half a second, the certainty flickered. Then she did what people like Linda always do when reality knocks. She got louder. "I don't need to show you anything," she snapped. "The board has determined it's community access. That's the end of it. You'll get your day to grovel at the meeting like everyone else." She didn't answer the question. She couldn't. And the little camera in my hand caught every second of her not answering it. The HOA president of Whispering Pines, on the record, claiming a right to my road, and unable to name a single document that gave it to her. I lowered the phone. "Okay," I said again. That second okay landed even worse than the first. I watched it bother her all the way back to her SUV. Here's the thing I understood driving home, that Linda never would. An easement is just a fancy word for written permission filed where everyone can check it. That's all. If it exists, it's a piece of paper at the county recorder's office with a number on it. If it doesn't exist, then no amount of newsletters, votes, or yelling in a parking lot can conjure it into being. She'd spent 3 years saying the road was the community's. Not once in all that time had she needed it to be true. She'd only needed everyone to be too afraid to ask. I wasn't afraid. And I just asked with the camera running. That night I started building in earnest. I pulled up the county recorder's online portal and ordered certified copies of my deed and the recorded plat of the entire subdivision, the official map that shows every lot line, every dedicated road, every easement that legally exists. I photographed every notice in the manila folder, front and back, with the dates showing. I logged into my email and exported every message the HOA had ever sent me into one clean file, sorted by date. And I went out to the gatepost in the dark with a flashlight and confirmed what I already knew. The camera was still running, still green, still quietly collecting every crossing. I wasn't going to argue with Linda Carr. I'd figured that out by then. You can't win an argument with someone who treats certainty as a substitute for facts. You'll just be standing in a parking lot forever while she gets louder. So I made a decision, and it felt less like anger than like relief. I wasn't going to stop her from driving through my ranch. I was going to let her. Every single time. Right past the camera, right onto the record, right into the file. She wanted a lien on my land. So I started building the one that would put a lien on her instead. The certified copies came back from the county in a flat envelope, and I spread them out on the kitchen table the way you'd lay out a hand of cards you already knew was winning. But before I tell you what was on that map, I have to tell you about Margaret. She came up my drive on foot, which nobody did 3 days after the parking lot scene. 81 years old, the wind chime widow, walking the half-mile from her house with a cake carrier in both hands like a shield. I met her at the gate, the same gate Linda wanted gone, and she looked up at me with a nervousness that made my chest hurt. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "If she sees my car, she'll know." So I walked. I brought her inside and made coffee, and slowly the whole thing came out. Margaret had lived in Whispering Pines for 19 years longer than Linda, longer than most of the board, and over those last 3 years, Linda had bled her. A fine for the wind chimes, a fine for a non-conforming mailbox that had been there since before the HOA existed, a fine for leaving her trash bin out 4 hours too long the morning after her husband's funeral. Each one small, each one payable, each one a little reminder of who was in charge. "I paid them," Margaret said, and her hands shook a little around the cup. "I always paid them. Because the one time I asked the question at a meeting, she looked at me and said, 'Margaret Liens don't care how old you are,' in front of everyone. And I thought, I'm a widow on a fixed income. I cannot lose this house. So I stopped asking questions." That's what fear does. It doesn't have to win every fight. It just has to win the first one, loudly enough that nobody starts a second. "I heard what you said to her at the boxes," Margaret went on. "About the paper, the recorded thing. Nobody's ever asked her for paper before." She set down her cup. "I came because I wanted to tell you you're not crazy. She does this to everyone. And I'll say it. Whatever you need, wherever you need me to say it, I'll say it." I want to be clear about something, because this is the part of the story where it would be easy to make it about Margaret, or about the neighborhood, or about the great injustice of homeowners associations in general. It wasn't about any of that. Not yet. Margaret mattered, and I told her so, and I wrote down everything she said and the dates she could remember. But Margaret was a witness. She was support. She was not the weapon. The weapon was on my kitchen table. After she left, I sat back down with the county documents, and I want to walk you through exactly what I was looking at, because it's simpler than Linda spent 3 years pretending it was. The first was my deed. One page that mattered. It described the boundaries of my property, and the legal description ran the full length of the road, both edges, all of it ending at the county route. In plain terms, the road wasn't next to my land. The road was my land. Every inch Linda's tires had ever touched belonged on paper to me. The second document was the recorded plat, the official subdivision map the developer filed back in the 90s, the one every lot in Whispering Pines was carved out of. A plat is the master map of a neighborhood. It shows every property line, every road, the developer dedicated to public or community use, and every easement anyone has a legal right to cross. If the HOA had a right to my road, it would be on that map. There'd be a line, a label, a recorded easement number. It would be there. It wasn't there. I went over it 3 times with a ruler and a magnifying glass. The plat showed the subdivision's own entrance, dedicated and labelled off the main road exactly where the developer had built it. It showed every internal street, and it showed my parcel sitting outside the subdivision boundary, entirely my road running through it, with no easement, no dedication, no community access of any kind drawn anywhere near it. The developer had known what Linda never bothered to learn. They'd built their own way in because they had no right to mine. There was no easement. There had never been an easement. There was a newsletter. I sat there a long time with those 2 pieces of paper. Not gloating, I want to be honest, it wasn't triumph I felt. It was something quieter and heavier. 3 years. An 81-year-old widow walking a half-mile on foot because she was afraid of a woman who had this entire time been standing on a right that did not exist. All of it built on a sentence in a cheerful font that nobody had ever been brave enough to ask her to prove. Then I made myself useful. I requested in writing through the proper channel a formal letter to the board that the HOA produce the recorded easement or dedication granting the association any legal interest in the excess road. Polite, specific, on the record. I knew exactly what they'd do because there was nothing to produce. They'd either ignore it or they'd double down and assert the easement existed in writing. Either way, I wanted it in writing. I wanted them to commit. And then I went out to the gatepost and pulled 11, now 19 days of footage off the camera onto my laptop. Clip after clip of the white SUV crossing my line. Each file stamped with a date, a time, and the GPS coordinates of the spot. And every one of those coordinates fell inside the boundary on the deed in my hand. Linda thought she'd been driving through a community road. I had 19 days of video of her trespassing one tire at a time, exactly like I said she would. I closed the laptop. I had the map, I had the deed, I had the footage. I had a witness who'd walked a half mile to stand with me. What I didn't have yet was the moment, the room, the audience, the instant where all of it would come down at once. I wasn't going to chase that. I was going to let Linda build it for me, the way she built everything, too loud, too sure, and far too public. I just had to wait for her to do something she couldn't take back. She was about to do exactly that. The thing she couldn't take back happened on a Tuesday morning, and I have all of it on video. I was in the barn when I heard the trucks. Not 1, 3. By the time I came around the side of the house, there was a pickup, a flatbed, and Linda's white SUV parked nose to tail on the county route, and a crew of 4 men in work gloves were standing at my gate with bolt cutters. Linda stood behind them in sunglasses, arms crossed, supervising. She had a clipboard. Of course she had a clipboard. "Morning," she called out, almost cheerful. "We're restoring community access." "That gate is locked because it's mine," I said. "That road is mine. You're standing on my property." She didn't even look at me. She nodded at the man with the bolt cutters. "I want you to understand the sound a chain makes when it's cut. It's small, a flat metallic snap, almost polite, and then the gate just swings free like it never meant anything." He cut my chain, the chain on my own gate, on my own land, and 2 of them lifted the gate off its hinges and walked it to the flatbed while I stood there filming with my hands shaking, not from fear, from the particular fury of watching someone destroy your property in front of you while smiling about it. "You can't do this," I said. "It's already done," Linda said. "The board voted. You were notified." Then it got worse, the way it always does with people who've never been told no. The gate was, down the road, was open, and Linda had what she wanted. But the horses, my 2 horses, had been in the front paddock, and the paddock gate sat just inside the now missing ranch gate, and in the noise and the strangers and the swinging metal, one of them spooked hard, hit the paddock latch and got out. Suddenly, there was 1,000 pounds of frightened animal loose on a road Linda had just declared a public thoroughfare, and her crew scattered, and Linda screamed, and for about 90 seconds it was genuine chaos. A horse that could have been hit by a car, or hurt itself, or hurt someone, all because a woman with a clipboard decided my locked gate was an obstruction. I got the horse. Calm voice, slow hands walked her back through and rigged the paddock shut with the lead rope because the latch was bent. My heart was going hard. When I turned back around, Linda was on her phone. She was calling the police. On me. "Yes, there's a man here blocking a public road and threatening us," she said loud, performing it. "He's aggressive. We're a homeowners association trying to maintain community access, and he won't let us through. We need an officer." Threatening. Aggressive. I hadn't raised my voice once, but she'd learned somewhere along the way that the story gets to the officer before the facts do, and she intended to be the one telling it. By now, neighbours had drifted down to the county route a dozen, then more, drawn by the trucks and the shouting. Margaret was among them near the back, her hand over her mouth. The rest just watched. This was the public square Linda lived for, and she worked it, narrating loudly for the crowd about the dangerous man who held the neighbourhood hostage, while my gate sat on the back of a flatbed behind her. The deputy who showed up was young and tired, and clearly did not want to be refereeing a homeowners association on a Tuesday. Linda got to him first, talking fast words like easement and community access, and board voted and aggressive. He listened. Then he turned to me. "I didn't argue. I'd learnt that much. I just said, calm as I could, with my pulse still up, "Officer, this is my property. The road's on my deed. They came onto my land and cut the chain on my gate and removed it. That's their crew loading it onto that flatbed right now. I have it all on camera." I pointed at the gatepost, "including that." He looked at the camera. He looked at the flatbed with my gate on it. He looked at Linda, who had just told him this was a public road, and at the very solid private gate that had, until 20 minutes ago, been locked across it. He couldn't sort it out on the spot. That's the honest truth of it. He wasn't a judge. He didn't have my deed in his hand. And a dispute over whether a road is private or community access is not something a deputy settles in a gravel lot on a Tuesday. He told everyone to cool down. He told Linda the gate removal looked like a civil property matter and possibly worse, and that she should not be cutting locks or removing structures over a boundary dispute. And he told me my recourse was to bring my documents to the proper venue. It wasn't justice. Linda took it as a win. She'd gotten the gate off, the cop hadn't arrested me, and she'd performed her whole show for the crowd. She actually smiled at me as she packed up. Smiled and got in her white SUV and backed down my road one more time. Right past the camera. Because here is what Linda, in all her supervising and clipboarding and performing for the deputy, never once thought about. Every second of it was recorded. Her crew cutting my chain, the gate coming off its hinges, her saying the board voted on camera, her calling 911 and telling a sworn officer I was aggressive and the road was public, a false report made out loud while she stood on my land destroying my property. The whole thing stamped with the date, the time, the coordinates. I had only one job left, and I did it before the deputy drove off. I walked over and asked him quietly just one thing. "Will you note the cut chain and the removed gate in your report, and that I said it was my property?" He looked at me for a second, then nodded and wrote it down. That was the last piece. I didn't need him to take my side. I just needed it on the record, in his handwriting, that on this date, Linda Carr's crew destroyed a locked private gate while she claimed a road she couldn't prove she owned. I went and stood by the empty post where my gate used to hang. The horses were quiet again. The trucks were gone. The orange dust was settling back down over the road my grandfather built, and somewhere in Linda's phone was a 911 call she thought made her the victim. She'd just destroyed private property in front of a sworn officer and 40 neighbours, and smiled at the camera that was going to end her. The notice for the special meeting went out the next morning, and for once, Linda told the truth in writing. The subject line read, "Resolution regarding the community access road." She wanted an audience for the kill, and she got one. The clubhouse was packed. I'd never seen it that full. Every folding chair taken, people standing along the back wall. 96 households worth of curiosity crammed into a room that smelled like burnt coffee. Word had gotten around about the gate, about the horse, about the deputy. People came to watch. I think a lot of them came to watch me lose. Linda sat at the front behind a long table with the rest of the board, and she had a lawyer with her. That was new. A real one in a real suit with a leather folio he kept squaring against the table like the corners might escape. The presence of him told me two things. 1. Linda had finally decided to put muscle behind the bluff. 2. She'd told her lawyer her version, and her version did not include the word deed. She opened by reading her resolution aloud, slow and satisfied. The association, she announced, would be filing suit to establish and formalize a permanent easement over the community access road for the benefit of all residents. And this was the part she savoured. The board had voted to place a lien on my property for the unpaid fines, now past $2,000, and would pursue foreclosure if the obstruction and the outstanding balance are not resolved. There it was, the top of the ladder. Not a note, not a fine, not a cut chain. My house. She was going for my house in front of the whole neighborhood, and she was smiling while she did it. "This individual," she said, not using my name, just this individual, "has held our community hostage for the last time. He has obstructed access, racked up fines, threatened board members, and required a police response. The board is done asking nicely." A murmur went through the room. I felt the eyes find me where I stood against the side wall. Margaret was 3 rows back, and I saw her start to rise, saw her mouth open, and I caught her eye and gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. Not here. She sat back down. I wasn't going to let an 81-year-old widow take the first arrow for me in a room Linda had stacked. Then Linda did the thing I've been waiting 3 years and 6 weeks for. Her lawyer leaned to her, and she nodded, and she said it for the record into the meeting minutes that the secretary was typing in real time at the end of the table. Let the record reflect that the association maintains a valid easement over the access road established through continuous community use, and that the board has formally voted to enforce and defend that easement through legal action. The secretary typed it. The board members raised their hands one by one to vote. 5 of them, on the record, affirming the existence of an easement none of them had ever seen because not one of them had ever asked Linda for the paper either. The lawyer wrote a note. The motion carried. She'd done it. She'd put it in writing under oath of the minutes in front of 96 households and her own attorney. The association maintains a valid easement. I want to tell you what it felt like to stand there, because it wasn't what you'd think. It looked from the outside like the worst moment of the whole thing. The room believed her. The board had voted to take my home. Even people who didn't like Linda were nodding along because she'd said it with a lawyer beside her, and a resolution on letterhead and certainty in a suit is very convincing to a room full of people who are afraid of you. Nobody stood up for me, not openly. A couple of folks near the back wouldn't meet my eyes the way you don't look at a man at his own sentencing. Margaret's hands were knotted in her lap. To everyone in that clubhouse, the story was over and I'd lost it. And inside, I was the calmest I'd been in 6 weeks. Because an easement established through continuous community use is a real legal idea, people do sometimes win a right to cross land they've used openly for long enough. But it is not a thing you vote into existence in a clubhouse. It is not a thing you declare in meeting minutes. It is a thing a court grants after looking at facts, and the very first fact a court looks at is the recorded plat, the map. The one I had a certified copy of in a folder in my truck, the one that showed no easement, no dedication, my parcel sitting clean outside their subdivision line. She had just bet my house on a legal theory that the official map of her own neighborhood demolished on site. She'd needed the easement to be true for 3 years and never once checked. And now she'd voted on it, sworn to it in the minutes, hired a man in a suit to defend it. She had taken the one assumption she should have verified, and she had nailed it to the wall in public, with witnesses in writing. When the meeting broke up, Linda found me by the door. She couldn't help herself. She leaned in close enough that only I could hear and said, "Bring whatever little papers you think you have to the hearing. It won't matter. The whole neighborhood just told you what's true." "Okay," I said, the third. "Okay." I watched it land. Watched that flicker of unease cross her face even in the middle of her victory. And then I walked out to my truck where the certified plat was waiting in the manila folder exactly where it had been the whole time. They voted to take my land that night. They'd just put their own signatures on the thing that was going to take theirs. The hearing was 6 weeks later in a county courtroom that smelled like floor wax and old paper. Linda came in like she'd come to the clubhouse, chin up, lawyer in tow, certain. She'd brought a contingent of board members to sit behind her like a jury she'd already won. She did not look at me once. Why would she? The whole neighborhood had told her what was true. Her lawyer went first and talked for 20 minutes. Continuous community use. Established access. A neighborhood relying for years on a road. He was good in the way a man is good when he's been handed a story and never told to check it. He set down his folio satisfied, and the judge turned to me. I stood up. I had one folder. I thought a long time about how to do this, and I decided the truth didn't need a speech. It needed a map. "Your Honor," I said, "the association says there's an easement. There's a simple way to settle that. An easement is a recorded document. If it exists, it's filed with the county with a number on the official map of the subdivision. I have the official map." I handed up the certified plat. One copy to the judge, one to Linda's lawyer. This is the recorded plat for Whispering Pines, filed by the developer in 1994 and certified by the county recorder last month. It shows every lot, every dedicated road, and every easement that legally exists in that neighbourhood. I let that sit 1 second. My property sits outside the subdivision boundary. The road runs through my parcel, and there is no easement drawn anywhere on it. Not a line, not a label, not a number. I watched Linda's lawyer find my parcel on the map. I watched his finger trace the boundary, then trace the road, then stop. He went very still. He leaned to Linda and said something low, and for the first time since I'd met her, Linda Carr's face did something other than certainty. It went blank. Then it went looking at the map, at her lawyer, at the map again, for the line that was supposed to be there. It wasn't there. It had never been there. The judge studied the plat for a long moment and then looked over his glasses at Linda's lawyer. Counsel, your client's claim is a recorded easement. This is the recorded plat. Where is it? The lawyer stood up, sat halfway down, stood again. Your Honour, our position is that continuous use over a period of years. That's a different claim than the one your client voted on, the judge said. And there it was. The door I'd left open at the meeting, swinging shut. Because I had one more thing, and I handed it up next. Your Honour, the association didn't argue continuous use. They voted on the record that they already had a valid recorded easement. I gave him the certified copy of the HOA's own meeting minutes. These are their minutes from 6 weeks ago. The board states, and I'll quote it, that the association maintains a valid easement over the access road. They didn't claim they might earn one someday. They swore they already had one. The plat says they never did. The room shifted. You could feel it. The board members behind Linda stopped looking like a jury and started looking like people who'd raised their hands to vote for something they'd never seen. One of them slid his chair an inch away from her. Just an inch. But in a quiet courtroom, an inch is loud. Linda's lawyer was whispering fast now, and Linda was shaking her head. And the judge let the silence stretch, the way judges do when they want a room to hear itself. I wasn't done, but I'd learned to let things land before I added to them. 2 receipts. Then I let the room breathe. Then I went on. There's one more thing the court should see, I said, because the association didn't just claim a road that isn't theirs, they acted on it. I had the footage cued. This is from a camera on my own gatepost. On the 14th, the board president brought a crew onto my property and had them cut the chain and remove my gate. I played 8 seconds. The snap of the chain, the gate coming off its hinges, Linda's voice clear and bright on the recording. We're restoring community access. The board voted. I heard someone in the gallery exhale like they'd been hit. A board member put his face in his hand. Linda had gone the colour of the courtroom walls. And this, I said, is the call she made 90 seconds later. I read it from the deputy's report, certified in his handwriting. Her words to dispatch. A man blocking a public road, aggressive, threatening. She told a sworn officer the road was public and that I was dangerous. The same road this map says is mine. The same morning, her crew destroyed my gate. That was 4. I stopped. 4 was enough. Everything I'd built over 6 weeks came down to a thing the judge could see in a single glance at a single map. And everything after it just locked the doors so no one could pretend their way back out. Linda's lawyer asked for a recess. The judge didn't grant it. He set down the plat, folded his hands, and spoke directly to her, not the lawyer. Miss Carr, you recorded a vote asserting an easement that does not appear on the recorded plat. You authorized the removal of a locked gate on private property, and you reported a private road as public to law enforcement. He let each one sit. I don't know yet what all of that adds up to, but it does not add up to an easement. Linda finally spoke. Everyone uses that road, she said, and her voice cracked on it. Everyone's always used it. Using a road, the judge said, is not the same as owning it. I'd have thought a homeowners association would understand the difference between a habit and a right. I almost laughed. He'd said the exact thing I'd known in my kitchen the first morning, the thing she'd built 3 years of fear on, never having to hear out loud. A habit and a right. The whole case in a sentence a court could see in one look at one map. Behind Linda, the board had finished separating itself from her by degrees. Chairs angled away, eyes down, the silent arithmetic of people calculating how much of this had their names on it too. The contingent she'd brought to watch me lose was watching something else entirely now. They were watching Linda Carr find out in public with a map in the judge's hands that the road had never been hers. She'd kept driving through my ranch. Every pass was a mine, and in the end, she set off every one of them herself, in a courtroom, smiling, right up until the second she stopped. The rulings came down over the following weeks, and none of them surprised me, because I'd read the same map the judge had. The court dismissed the HOA's suit completely. There was no easement. There had never been an easement, and you cannot vote one into existence in a clubhouse. The judge issued a declaration confirming the road as my private property, and entered a no trespass order against the association and against Linda Carr personally. She was not to set foot or tire on my land again. The lien on my house was void. Every fine, all the way back to the first $75 orange notice, was wiped out as a charge against a road they'd never had any right to. That was the legal payoff, and it was clean. But the part that mattered to me came after. The money turned around and ran the other direction. Because Linda hadn't just been wrong. She'd cut a chain and removed a gate on private property, and she'd done it on camera. The court held the association liable for the destruction of my gate and my legal costs. The HOA's insurance covered some of it and balked at the rest, because their own minutes showed the board had voted to do the thing, which made it look less like an accident and more like a decision. The association had to pay to replace my gate, a new one, heavier than the old, which I found a particular satisfaction in letting them fund. And the false police report didn't just evaporate. The county opened a look into it and HOA president files false report against homeowner while destroying his property is not a sentence that helps anyone keep a leadership position. Which brings me to the social payoff and to the thing fear always forgets. It only works until someone proves it was bluffing. The recording got around. Of course it did. 96 households and a video of Linda cutting a man's gate and lying to a cop about it. The same neighbors who wouldn't meet my eyes in that clubhouse suddenly remembered every fine she'd ever hit them with. At the next meeting, I heard about it from Margaret. I didn't go. They voted her out. Not gently. The new board's first act was to formally rescind the Community Access Road resolution and strike it from the minutes, which I appreciated as a kind of poetry, the sentence that started it all. Deleted by the same body that had once raised 5 hands to swear it was true. Margaret called me the night Linda lost the presidency. She didn't gloat either. She just said, "I asked a question at the meeting tonight, out loud. Nobody fined me." And then this 81-year-old woman laughed, really laughed, for what I suspect was the first time at an HOA meeting in 3 years. That laugh was worth more to me than the dismissed lien. People ask me sometimes if I felt vindicated, and the honest answer is that vindication was never the feeling. The feeling was quiet. It was the morning a few weeks later when the new gate went up, heavier hung on the same posts my grandfather set, paid for by the association that tried to take the road it hangs across. I put a new chain on it. I locked it. And for the first time in 3 years, nobody came up the drive to tell me I couldn't. I kept a few things. The manila folder snaps shut on a shelf in the office. I don't open it, but I like knowing it's there. The orange notice. The first one, the one I peeled off my fence that first morning and folded into my jacket instead of throwing away. I framed it. My wife thought that was strange until I explained it wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder that the loudest, most certain person in the room is very often standing on nothing at all. And the only thing that ever beats certainty is a piece of paper that's actually true. And a camera. I left it on the gate post. I don't really need it anymore. The road's quiet now. The white SUV long gone to wherever Linda went after she sold and moved out of the subdivision she used to rule. But I leave it up there, still bolted, 6 inches above where her window used to be. Its little light still blinking green. Not because I'm waiting for trouble. Because I learned something on this road my grandfather built, something worth keeping the light on for. She kept driving through my ranch because she was sure she could, and she never once checked whether she was right.
Every pass was a mine, and she set off every one of them herself, smiling certain all the way down.
I just make sure the camera was running when she did.